She had only two options: accept the false accusations and spend 20 years in prison, or flee and become a fugitive from justice. Dr. Sarah Williams chose to flee. Now she walked the cold streets of Chicago without documents, without money, without identity. What she didn't imagine was that this desperate decision would lead her straight to an encounter with a family shattered by pain, who needed her as much as she needed a second chance at life. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, and don't forget to like this video if it touches your heart. Chicago General Hospital was the largest hospital complex in Illinois, known for its specialized treatments and excellent medical staff. It was there that Sarah Williams had worked for 18 years as a pediatric cardiologist. She wasn't just another employee. She was considered a medical prodigy, the doctor who could save babies that other doctors considered lost causes. Sarah had dedicated herself completely to her medical career. She graduated at 22, specialized at 25, and by 40 was already head of the pediatric cardiology department. Her personal life had taken a back seat. She was single, childless, but considered herself a mother to all those children who passed through her hands during complex heart surgeries. What few knew is that Sarah also maintained a clandestine clinic in her own home on weekends. There, she treated children from needy families for free who couldn't get access to procedures through Medicaid. She used equipment she bought with her own money, medications she acquired without prescriptions, and performed small surgeries that could save lives that had been waiting in line for months. For 15 years, Sarah saved more than 300 children through this clandestine clinic. Children with congenital heart defects, severe arrhythmias, heart valve problems, all treated at no cost to families, all saved by a doctor who couldn't accept that children died for lack of access to treatment. But life has a cruel way of punishing even the best intentions. Everything began to crumble on a Thursday in April when Sarah operated on a 3-month-old baby with hypoplastic left heart syndrome in her home clinic. It was an extremely complex procedure, normally only done in major surgical centers, but the baby had been on the Medicaid waiting list for 2 months and wouldn't have more than a few weeks to live if not operated on immediately. The surgery was a success. The baby survived and recovered perfectly, but 3 days later, the parents, pressured by a neighbor who had discovered the clandestine clinic, decided to report Sarah to the state medical board. "She may be a good doctor," the neighbor told the baby's parents, "but she's practicing medicine illegally. What if something had gone wrong? You could have lost your son because of her irresponsibility." The parents, frightened by the legal implications of having participated in a clandestine procedure, gave in to pressure and filed a formal complaint against Sarah. What followed was a devastating investigation. The state medical board discovered not only the clandestine clinic, but also found irregularities in how Sarah obtained controlled medications, hospital equipment without legal origin, and patients who were treated outside official protocols. "Dr. Sarah Williams," said the board president during the disciplinary hearing, "you are accused of illegal practice of medicine, use of controlled medications without proper prescription, performing surgical procedures in an unlicensed environment, endangering the lives of minors, and fraud against the public health system." Sarah tried to explain her motivations, show the positive results of her treatments, present thank you letters from families whose children had been saved. But none of that mattered from a legal standpoint. She had broken dozens of medical laws, regardless of her humanitarian intentions. "Doctor," said the district attorney, "you may be a competent physician, but your actions endangered the lives of hundreds of children. If one of these procedures had gone wrong, if a child had died in your clandestine clinic, you would be responsible for manslaughter." Sarah was sentenced to 20 years in prison and permanent loss of her medical license. Her license to practice medicine was immediately revoked. All her assets were confiscated to pay fines and damages. Within days, the most respected doctor at Chicago General had become a convicted criminal. It was during transport to prison that Sarah made the decision that would change her life forever. When the official vehicle stopped at a gas station, she managed to escape through the back and disappear into the streets of Chicago. Now, Sarah was officially a fugitive from justice. Her photo circulated in the news as a dangerous doctor who put children at risk. No one mentioned the 300 lives she had saved or her true motivations. To public opinion, she was just another professional who had abused the trust placed in her. If you've made it this far and aren't subscribed to the channel yet, consider subscribing now. This is how we can continue bringing stories that touch the heart and make you reflect on life. Write in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. Your support makes all the difference. During the first months as a fugitive, Sarah managed to survive using cash she kept at home for emergencies. She hid in cheap boarding houses, roadside motels, places where they didn't ask many questions about documents. But when the money ran out, her situation became desperate. Without documents, she couldn't get work. Without a fixed address, she couldn't get government assistance. Without legal identity, she didn't exist to the system. That's how one of Illinois' most respected pediatric cardiologists found herself sleeping under bridges and begging for food on the street. Chicago's winter was especially cruel to those without shelter. Sarah quickly learned the rules of urban survival: where to find food, which places were safe to sleep, how to avoid conflicts with other homeless people and the police. During the day, she tried to stay invisible. During the night, she looked for shelters protected from the cold. Her physical body deteriorated rapidly. She lost 15 pounds. Her skin became dry and bruised. Her clothes became dirty and torn. But it was the emotional deterioration that almost destroyed her. The woman who had dedicated her life to healing children was now seen by society as a threat to children. Every news report about her reinforced the narrative that she was an irresponsible doctor who put lives at risk. Sarah began to believe that maybe she really was a criminal. It was 4 months of life on the streets, 4 months of cold, hunger, fear, and despair. Sarah was losing the will to live when fate placed a new opportunity in her path. It was a cold August morning when Sarah took shelter in the entrance of a residential building in Lincoln Park. She was shivering from cold and hunger when she heard desperate screams coming from the first floor. "Help! Someone help me! My baby isn't breathing!" All of Sarah's medical instincts awakened immediately. Even after months living as a homeless person, even afraid of being recognized, she couldn't ignore a call for help involving a child. She ran up the stairs and found a young woman in panic holding a baby of approximately 6 months. The child was clearly in respiratory arrest, with blue lips and no reflexes. "He choked on baby food," the woman said through tears. "I don't know what to do." Sarah didn't hesitate. She took the baby in her arms and immediately applied the Heimlich maneuver adapted for infants. She turned the child's stomach down, supported him on her forearm, and gave 5 firm blows between the shoulder blades. On the 3rd attempt, a piece of food came out of the baby's mouth, who immediately began to cry and breathe normally. "There," Sarah said, handing the baby to the mother. "He's fine now. But see a pediatrician today for a routine exam." The mother looked at Sarah with eyes full of tears of relief and gratitude. "You saved my son. How can I thank you?" Sarah, realizing she had exposed herself too much, tried to leave discreetly. "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would do the same thing." "Wait!" The woman grabbed her arm. "Are you a doctor?" Sarah hesitated. "I was," she finally answered. "Are you hungry? Want to come in for coffee, eat something?" Sarah hadn't eaten a decent meal in 2 days. Hunger overcame caution. "I would appreciate it very much," she admitted quietly. The woman introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez, 28 years old, a teacher and single mother of little Michael, who had just turned 6 months. She lived alone with her son in a simple but cozy apartment. "Sorry about the mess," Jennifer said, preparing coffee. "Being a single mother isn't easy. especially when you don't understand anything about babies and your son decides to choke on a Thursday morning. Sarah observed the domestic environment with nostalgia. It had been months since she'd smelled fresh coffee or seen a home organized with care. "Is this your first child?" she asked. "Yes, and probably the last," Jennifer laughed nervously. "The father disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. My family lives in another state. Basically, it's just me and Michael against the world." During the meal, Jennifer noticed the medical knowledge Sarah demonstrated when talking about baby care. She knew exactly how to prevent choking, what signs to watch for to detect breathing problems, how to position the child to sleep safely. "Did you work with children for a long time?" Jennifer asked. "I worked," Sarah answered evasively, "for a long time." "Can I ask a personal question? Are you going through difficulties?" Sarah looked at her dirty clothes and disheveled hair. It was obvious she was in a precarious situation. "I am," she admitted, "for several months." Jennifer was thoughtful for a moment. "Listen, I know we don't know each other, but you saved my son today, and I desperately need help with him. I work all day and leave Michael at a daycare that doesn't inspire much confidence in me." Sarah listened attentively. "How about we test each other for a week? You help me with Michael during the day, I give you shelter, food, and a basic salary. If it works out, we can think about something more permanent." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She was being offered a chance to start over, to have purpose again. "Jennifer, you don't know me. You don't know anything about my past." "I know you have medical knowledge and saved my son without hesitating," Jennifer replied. "For now, that's enough for me." That's how Sarah, for the second time in her life, found herself living with an unknown family. The room Jennifer offered her was small but clean. There was a single bed, a wardrobe, and a desk. For someone who had spent months sleeping on the street, it seemed like a palace. In the first days, Sarah remained cautious and discreet. She cared for Michael with professional competence, but avoided demonstrating too much knowledge so as not to arouse suspicion. Gradually, however, living with the baby began to awaken feelings she had suppressed during the months of flight. Michael was a special child, always smiling, curious, affectionate. But Sarah noticed there were some developmental issues that were concerning. The baby had a heart murmur that Jennifer had mentioned casually, but which had never been properly investigated. "The pediatrician said it's normal," Jennifer explained when Sarah asked about the murmur. "That many babies have it, and it goes away on its own." Sarah knew that not all murmurs were benign. Some indicated heart defects that needed early treatment, but she couldn't suggest more detailed exams without revealing her specialized medical knowledge. It was during the second week that the situation became complicated. Michael woke up one night with difficulty breathing, slightly blue lips, and a weak cry that indicated extreme fatigue. "Sarah!" Jennifer called her desperately. "Something's wrong with Michael." Sarah quickly examined the baby and recognized the signs of congestive heart failure. The murmur wasn't benign. Michael had a heart defect that was manifesting now that he was bigger and more active. "Jennifer, you need to take him to the hospital now," Sarah said urgently. "Is it serious?" "It could be. We can't wait." At the hospital, the doctors confirmed what Sarah had already diagnosed. Michael had a ventricular septal defect, a hole between the heart chambers that was causing cardiac overload. He needed corrective surgery as soon as possible. "How much does the surgery cost?" Jennifer asked the cardiac surgeon. "Through Medicaid, it doesn't cost the family anything, but the waiting list is 8 months, the doctor explained. Privately, it costs $80,000 and can be done next week. Jennifer felt her world collapse. She didn't have $80,000, not even $8,000, and Michael couldn't wait 8 months. "Doctor," Sarah interjected in the conversation, "what exactly is the defect? What type of VSD?" The doctor looked at her surprised. "Are you in the medical field?" "I was," Sarah replied, immediately regretting exposing herself. "It's a perimembranous VSD of 16 millimeters with significant hemodynamic repercussion," the doctor explained technically. Sarah nodded. She knew exactly what it was, and knew it was a procedure she herself had performed dozens of times in her clandestine clinic. That night, back at the apartment with Michael medicated but still at risk, Sarah faced the biggest dilemma of her life. She could try to convince Jennifer to wait the 8 months for Medicaid, knowing the baby probably wouldn't survive. She could suggest she look for loans to pay for private surgery, or she could reveal who she really was and offer a third option. "Jennifer," Sarah said finally, "I need to tell you the truth about who I am." Jennifer, who was rocking Michael in her arms, looked at her attentively. "My name is Sarah Williams. I'm a pediatric cardiologist, or rather I was. I was convicted of illegal practice of medicine and have been a fugitive from justice for 4 months. The silence that followed was heavy. I maintained a clandestine clinic where I operated on children like Michael for free. I saved more than 300 children over 15 years, but I was discovered, convicted, and fled from prison." Jennifer continued rocking Michael, processing the information. "I'm telling you this because I can save Michael. I have the knowledge, the experience, and I know where to get the necessary equipment. But it would be illegal again, and you would be at risk too." Jennifer finally spoke. "Can you really save my son?" "I can. I've done this surgery more than 50 times, and if something goes wrong, I take full responsibility. But if we do nothing, Michael will die in the next few months." Jennifer looked at her son in her arms. The baby was breathing with difficulty, even medicated. "What do we need to do? If you're enjoying this story and it's touching your heart, leave your like and comment below. Would you do what Sarah is about to do? Would you risk everything to save a life? I want to know your opinion." Sarah explained the plan to Jennifer. They would need an adequate place to perform the surgery, sterilized equipment, specific medications, and at least 12 hours without interruptions. Sarah knew a retired veterinarian who had worked with her on some cases and who could lend a well-equipped surgical room. "Dr. Thompson always supported me when I did the clandestine surgeries," Sarah explained. "He has a veterinary clinic with first-class equipment. We've done procedures there before." "But is it safe to operate on a baby in a veterinary clinic? The equipment is the same used on humans. The sterilization is identical. The only difference is the location, but that doesn't affect the quality of surgery." Jennifer agreed to the plan. The following Saturday, they took Michael to Dr. Thompson's clinic, a 60-year-old man who knew Sarah's reputation and didn't hesitate to help. "Sarah, I know you're in a complicated situation, but I also know you're the best pediatric cardiologist I've ever met," he said, preparing the operating room. "If you think you can save this baby, let's do it." The surgery lasted 4 hours. Sarah worked with the precision and confidence of someone who had done the procedure hundreds of times. She closed Michael's heart defect with perfect technique, without complications. When the baby woke from anesthesia, breathing normally, with pink lips and crying strongly, Sarah felt a satisfaction she hadn't experienced in months. "Did it work?" Jennifer asked with tears in her eyes. "It worked," Sarah confirmed. "Michael is cured." In the following days, the baby recovered quickly. He returned to playing, eating well, sleeping peacefully. The heart murmur had completely disappeared. He was a normal, healthy child. Jennifer watched her son's transformation with immense gratitude towards Sarah. "How can I thank you? You saved my son's life." "You don't need to thank me. It was my duty as a doctor." "But you're not officially a doctor. You lost your license, remember?" Sarah was thoughtful. "I may have lost the legal right to practice medicine, but I didn't lose the knowledge or the moral responsibility to use that knowledge to save lives." It was at that moment that Jennifer made a decision that would change everything. "Sarah, I want to help you clear your name." "Jennifer, you can't get involved in this. You could be arrested for complicity." "I could be, but I can't stand by knowing that a person who saves children is being persecuted as a criminal." Jennifer began researching Sarah's case. She read all the reports, all the public processes, talked to lawyers. She discovered that Sarah wasn't the only doctor in America who maintained clandestine care for needy children, but was one of the few who had been effectively punished. Sarah, your case isn't about illegal medicine. It's about unequal access to health care, Jennifer concluded after weeks of research. You were punished for doing what the state should do: guarantee medical treatment for all children. Jennifer discovered something important. Several of the families whose children had been operated on by Sarah in her clandestine clinic had tried to testify in her defense during the trial, but their testimonies were ignored by the court as irrelevant to the legal question. The families tried to defend you, but nobody wanted to listen, Jennifer told her. Maybe it's time to give voice to these people in a way that can't be ignored. Jennifer began contacting the families of children who had benefited from Sarah's treatments. The first call was to Carlos and Maria Santos, parents of a girl who had been operated on for tetralogy of Fallot 3 years ago. "Dr. Sarah!" Maria exclaimed when Jennifer mentioned the name. "Of course I remember her. She saved our Anna's life. If it weren't for her, our daughter would have died. Did you know she lost her medical license and is a fugitive from justice?" "We knew, and we think it's a terrible injustice. Dr. Sarah is a saint. How can they persecute someone who dedicates their life to saving children?" Jennifer talked to 20 more families, and all told similar stories. Desperate parents who had found hope when there was none. Children who were alive and healthy thanks to Sarah's care. "We need to do something," said Eduardo Pereira, father of a boy who had been operated on for transposition of great arteries. "Dr. Sarah saved my son. I can't stand by watching her be treated like a criminal. What would you be willing to do to help her?" Jennifer asked. "Anything," Eduardo replied. "She gave me back my son. I owe my life to her." It was then that Jennifer had an idea that would completely change the course of the story. She organized a meeting with all the families benefited by Sarah's treatments. They scheduled it for the following Saturday at a public school that one of the mothers had managed to borrow. When Sarah learned about the meeting, she was apprehensive. "Jennifer, you're exposing yourself too much. If the police discover where I am..." "Sarah, you spent months hiding because nobody knew your true story. Now it's time for people to know who you really are." On Saturday, more than 80 people showed up at the school. There were fathers, mothers, grandparents, and the children themselves who had been saved by Sarah. Some were already teenagers, others still small, but all with one thing in common: they were alive because of her. "Everyone," Jennifer began addressing the group, "you know why we're here. Dr. Sarah Williams, the woman who saved our children, is being persecuted by justice as if she were a common criminal." A murmur of indignation ran through the group. "She sacrificed her career, her freedom, everything she had, so our children could live," continued Eduardo Pereira. "And now they want to send her to jail for it." "What can we do?" asked a mother. "We can tell the truth," Jennifer replied. "We can show the world who Sarah really is." The families decided to organize a public movement supporting Sarah. They would create an online manifesto, organize a demonstration in downtown Chicago, seek the press to tell their stories. Sarah followed the preparations with a mixture of gratitude and fear. On one hand, she was touched by the family's mobilization. On the other, she knew that public exposure could result in her immediate arrest. "What if this goes wrong?" she asked Jennifer the night before the demonstration. "Then at least we tried," Jennifer replied. "At least people will know there's another side to the story." The demonstration was scheduled for the following Sunday in Millennium Park, downtown Chicago. During the week, the movement gained repercussion on social media. Doctors, nurses, teachers, parents of children with heart problems began sharing the story and supporting Sarah. On Sunday, more than 500 people gathered in the park. There were the families Jennifer had contacted, but also other people who had discovered the event through social media and decided to participate. Sarah watched the crowd from afar, hidden behind a tree. Seeing so many people gathered for her cause was exciting and terrifying at the same time. "You need to appear," Jennifer said. "It's your story. You need to tell it personally. What if the police are there? Then we'll face that when it happens." Sarah took a deep breath and walked toward the small, improvised stage. When people recognized her, there was an explosion of applause that lasted several minutes. "I don't know what to say," Sarah began with a trembling voice. "When I started treating children in my clinic, I never imagined I would reach this moment." Her voice became firmer. "I want you to know that I don't consider myself a hero. I'm just a doctor who couldn't accept that children died for lack of access to treatment." She looked at the gathered families. "Every surgery I performed, every risk I took was worth it to see these children grow up healthy." She paused and looked directly at the television cameras that were broadcasting the event. "If this makes me a criminal in the eyes of the law, then I accept being a criminal. But I don't accept being called irresponsible. Every procedure I performed was done with maximum care and technical competence." Emotion took over her voice. "I'm here today because these families gave me courage to face the truth. And the truth is that our healthcare system fails to protect the most vulnerable children." One by one, the families began telling their stories. Maria Santos was first, holding the hand of Ana, now 8 years old and completely healthy. "5 years ago," Maria said with an emotional voice, "doctors told us Ana had a complex heart disease and needed urgent surgery. They also said the Medicaid waiting list was 10 months. She paused to control her emotion. "Our daughter didn't have 10 months. She had at most 6 weeks to live, if not operated on." Ana took the microphone from her mother. "Dr. Sarah operated on my heart, and now I can run, play, be like other children. She's my hero." Ned. The next family to speak was that of Peter Oliveira, a boy who had been born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. "Peter needed 3 complex surgeries in his first years of life," his father said. "The first was done through Medicaid, but the other 2 had very long waiting lists. Dr. Sarah did the other 2 operations and saved my son." Peter, now 6 years old, waved to the crowd from his father's shoulders. When it was Jennifer's turn to speak, she went up on stage carrying Michael in her arms. "This is my son, Michael. 3 months ago, he was dying because of a heart defect. Surgery through Medicaid would have taken 8 months. Michael didn't have 8 months." She looked at Sarah. "Sarah operated on my son in a veterinary clinic because it was the only available place. She risked everything, her freedom, her security to save a child she didn't even know." Michael, now a healthy and smiling baby, clapped for the crowd. "If caring for sick children is a crime, then our society is sick," Jennifer concluded. The event ended with the crowd singing a song of hope and shouting words of support. Journalists surrounded Sarah for interviews, but she was emotionally exhausted. "Just one question," insisted a reporter. "Would you surrender to authorities if you had guarantees of a fair trial?" Sarah thought for a moment. "I would surrender if I had guarantees that other children wouldn't die waiting in line while I'm in prison," she replied. "My freedom is worth nothing if other families continue going through the despair these people went through." That night, Sarah returned to Jennifer's apartment completely transformed. For the first time in months, she felt she was no longer alone against the world. There were hundreds of people willing to fight alongside her. The repercussion of the demonstration was immediate and massive. The video of the event went viral on social media, being shared thousands of times. Hashtags like "Knock Justice for Sarah" and "Dr. Hero" became trending topics on Twitter. Public opinion began to divide between those who defended the rigidity of the law and those who supported Sarah's humanitarian motivations. 3 days after the demonstration, something completely unexpected happened. Dr. Richard Miller, director of Chicago General Hospital and Sarah's former boss, gave a press conference that changed everything. "I have followed with attention the events of recent days about Dr. Sarah Williams' case," Dr. Richard said before the cameras. "As her former supervisor for more than a decade, I feel obligated to clarify some points about her professional conduct." Sarah watched the interview with her heart racing. "During the 18 years she worked with us, Dr. Sarah never had a single complaint for malpractice. Her success rate in pediatric cardiac surgeries was 98%, the highest in the hospital. The director paused. I knew she maintained extra care on weekends, but assumed they were normal private consultations. I never imagined the extent of her humanitarian work. Dr. Richard looked directly at the cameras. After reviewing the cases she treated clandestinely, I can affirm that all procedures were performed with impeccable technical competence. There wasn't a single serious complication in more than 300 surgeries. Dr. Richard's statement completely changed the narrative about Sarah. If the hospital director himself, one of the state's greatest medical authorities, was attesting to her competence, how could she be considered dangerous? The next day, other doctors began publicly manifesting support for Sarah. Dr. Paul Cardoso, president of the American Society of Pediatric Cardiology, gave an interview stating that cases like Dr. Sarah's evidence the serious deficiencies of our public health system. We cannot criminalize doctors who try to solve problems the state cannot solve, he declared. We need to change the system, not punish those who try to save it. Public pressure grew exponentially. Politicians began taking positions on the case. The governor of Illinois declared he would personally review Sarah's situation. The Department of Health announced a special commission to analyze pediatric cardiac care policies. But the most significant change came from a totally unexpected source. Dr. Jose Mendonça, the prosecutor who had conducted the case against Sarah, gave an exclusive interview in which he admitted that new facts have come to light that made him reconsider his initial position. When I conducted the process against Dr. Sarah, my focus was exclusively on the legality of her actions, he explained. I hadn't adequately considered the humanitarian context and positive results of her work. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. After talking to several of the benefited families and reviewing medical records, I recognize this case raises complex questions about healthcare access that go beyond simple law enforcement. The prosecutor made a significant pause. I am recommending to the district attorney's office that this case be re-evaluated, considering the possibility of dismissing charges or, at minimum, renegotiating the terms of conviction. Jennifer screamed with joy when she heard the statement. Sarah, on her part, remained cautious. She had learned not to create expectations too high. It could just be political rhetoric, she told Jennifer. They might be saying this just because of public pressure. But Jennifer was optimistic. Sarah, you have support from your former boss, other doctors, hundreds of families, public opinion. This isn't just rhetoric. It's real change. A week later, Sarah received a call that would change her life forever. It was Dr. Richard from Chicago General. Sarah, I need to speak with you personally. Can we meet? Dr. Richard, you know I'm a fugitive. I can't appear publicly. Don't worry about that. I want you to come to the hospital. I have a proposal for you. Sarah hesitated. Going to the hospital would be completely exposing herself. Trust me, Dr. Richard insisted. You won't regret it. The next day, Sarah entered Chicago General Hospital for the first time in 5 months. Her arrival caused commotion. Nurses, doctors, staff stopped to greet her. Many were crying. "Dr. Sarah!" exclaimed Nurse Rosa, who had worked with her for 10 years. "We missed you so much. You're greatly missed here." Sarah was moved to reunite with her former colleagues. Everyone received her as a hero, not as a criminal. Dr. Richard led her to his office, where a hospital committee was gathered. "Sarah," he said solemnly, "on behalf of Chicago General Hospital and the entire medical board, I would like to officially offer your reinstatement to the staff." Sarah was speechless. "But, doctor, I'm still technically a fugitive." "About that?" Dr. Richard smiled. "Our legal team is working with the district attorney's office to resolve your legal situation. We believe that soon you'll be able to practice medicine again without any impediment." The medical board president stood up. "Sarah, in addition to reinstatement, we would like to propose the creation of an official pediatric cardiac assistance program for needy families, with you as coordinator." Sarah began to cry. It was more than she had ever dreamed. It would be a way to officialize and expand the work you were already doing, Dr. Richard explained, with adequate resources, appropriate facilities, and total legal backing. But I lost my medical license. The State Medical Board has already signaled they're willing to review your case. With all the support you've gained, they believe the revocation was disproportionate. If you're enjoying this story and feel it touched your heart, leave a like and share in the comments. Do you believe Sarah deserved a second chance? Your opinion matters to us. 2 days later, the news everyone was waiting for finally arrived. The Federal District Attorney's Office officially announced the dismissal of all charges against Sarah Williams, recognizing that her humanitarian motivations and the positive results of her work justify a differentiated approach to the case. The State Medical Board, in the same week, restored her medical license and issued a note stating that exceptional cases require exceptional analyses. The story had national repercussion. Sarah became a symbol of the fight for a more humane and accessible health system. She received invitations to speak at universities, hospitals, public policy events. But for Sarah, the greatest victory wasn't in public recognition. It was in the fact that she could now legally do what she had always done clandestinely: save children. The Pediatric Cardiac Assistance Program was officially launched 3 months later, with Sarah as coordinator. The program created legal mechanisms for children from needy families to receive emergency cardiac surgeries, financed by a combination of public resources and private donations. "It's like I'm doing the same thing as before," Sarah explained to Jennifer, "but now with law support instead of opposition." Jennifer had decided to work as a social worker for the program, helping families navigate the health system. Michael, now 10 months old and completely healthy, became the program's poster baby. 6 months after her reinstatement, Sarah received a visit that moved her deeply. It was Ana Santos, the girl she had operated on 3 years ago and who was now 11 years old. "Dr. Sarah," Ana said with a radiant smile, "I brought something to show you." She opened a folder full of drawings and school essays. "I wrote an essay about you at school. The theme was My Hero." Sarah read the essay with tears in her eyes. The girl described how a brave doctor had saved her life and how she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up to help other children. "Ana, this is beautiful. Dr. Sarah, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, dear. Why did you risk everything to save children you didn't even know?" Sarah thought for a moment about the answer. "Because when you see a child suffering, you can't think of anything else except how to help them. And when you have the knowledge to help, doing nothing would be more painful than any consequence." Ana nodded seriously. "That's why I want to be a doctor, to have the knowledge that helps." 2 years after the day she had fled from prison, Sarah was again saving lives in the hospital, but now with full support from the institution and society. The program she coordinated had already benefited more than 500 children, all treated legally and with adequate resources. Jennifer had become her best friend and work partner. Michael grew up as if Sarah were his real aunt, a second mother that destiny had placed in his life at the exact moment he needed her most. Sarah began receiving thank you letters, not only from families directly benefited, but also from doctors in other states who had been inspired by her story to create similar programs. "Doctor Sarah," said a letter from a cardiologist in Miami, "your courage inspired me to set up an assistance program here in Florida. We've already operated on 50 children in the last 6 months. Thank you for showing us it's possible to make a difference." Sarah realized her story had transformed into something much bigger than her own life. It had become a catalyst for systematic changes in pediatric cardiac care throughout the country. One day, a family arrived at the hospital that made her remember why she had started it all. It was a young couple with a 2-month-old baby diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, the same condition as the first baby she had operated on clandestinely years ago. "Dr. Sarah," said the father with tears in his eyes. "They told us you can help our daughter." Sarah looked at the fragile baby in the mother's arms. It was exactly the type of case that had motivated her to start her clandestine clinic. She smiled and extended her arms to examine the child. "We'll take care of her," she said, with the same determination as always. "And this time, we'll do everything within the law." The surgery was a complete success. The baby recovered perfectly and left the hospital a week later, healthy and smiling. "Doctor," the mother said at discharge, "how can I thank you?" "You don't need to thank me," Sarah replied. "You just need to let your daughter be happy and healthy. That's the best thanks I can receive." 3 years later, Sarah was invited to speak at Congress about public health policies. During her speech, which was broadcast nationally, she said, "I learned that true medicine isn't just about mastering surgical techniques, but about breaking down barriers that prevent children from having access to those techniques. A health system that doesn't reach those who need it most isn't a system, it's a privilege." The audience rose in prolonged applause. "My story isn't about a brave doctor who broke rules. It's about a system that fails when its rules prevent children from being saved, and about the capacity we all have to change that system when we decide that saving lives is more important than following bureaucracies." That night, Sarah returned to Chicago, where Jennifer had prepared a special dinner to celebrate. Michael, now 3 years old and perfectly healthy, had made a drawing of Sarah speaking at Congress. "Aunt Sarah," he said during dinner, "when I grow up, I also want to help sick children like you do. And how would you like to help?" "I want to be a heart doctor, but a doctor who operates on all children, not just the rich ones." Sarah smiled, seeing in that child the continuation of the work she had dedicated her entire life to. 5 years after the day she left prison as a fugitive, Sarah was again saving lives. But now she had created a system that would continue functioning long after she was no longer there. The Cardiac Assistance Program had expanded to all 50 states and inspired similar initiatives in other Latin American countries. One morning, Sarah found a letter on her desk that made her cry with emotion. It was from Peter Oliveira, the boy she had operated on for hypoplastic left heart syndrome when he was 6 months old and who was now 8 years old. "Dr. Sarah," the letter said in a child's careful handwriting, "my mum told me you almost went to prison for saving me. I want you to know it wasn't in vain. I'm going to study hard and be a doctor like you when I grow up. I'm going to save other babies like me. Thank you for giving me a life. Now I'm going to use this life to give life to others." Sarah realized her journey had been completed in a way she had never imagined. She hadn't just saved hundreds of children directly, but had inspired a new generation of doctors committed to universal care. But Sarah's story was far from over. In the following months, she began receiving international invitations to speak about her work. The first call came from the World Health Organization, which wanted her to participate in a panel on innovations in pediatric public health. "Dr. Sarah," said the WHO representative during the call, "your case has become a worldwide reference on how to transform individual initiatives into effective public policies. We would like you to share your experience with delegates from 50 countries." Sarah hesitated. Speaking internationally would mean leaving Chicago, leaving Jennifer and Michael, leaving direct work with children. "Can I bring my family?" she asked. "Of course. Actually, we would like Jennifer to also participate in the panel, speaking about the role of social assistance in the program's success." That's how Sarah, Jennifer, and Michael, now 4 years old, traveled to Geneva, Switzerland. For Michael, it was his first international trip. For Sarah, it was the first time she had left America since becoming a fugitive years ago. During the conference, Sarah met doctors from around the world who faced challenges similar to those she had faced. Dr. Amara Okafor from Nigeria told how she had created a clandestine system to operate on children with cardiac malformations in her country. Dr. Luis Mendoza from Mexico reported similar experiences on the border with the United States. What you did in America inspired movements worldwide, Dr. Okafor said during a conference break. Doctors in 20 countries began questioning systems that prevent adequate treatment for needy children. Sarah realized her story had transcended borders and cultures. The dilemma between following unjust rules or saving lives was universal. During her presentation at WHO, Sarah spoke to an audience of more than 300 health professionals from around the world. "My story isn't unique," she began. "In all countries there are doctors who face the dilemma between insensitive bureaucracies and children who need immediate help. The difference between my case and others is that I had the support of a community that decided to fight for change." She showed slides with photos of children she had operated on, public demonstrations, the creation of the official program. "I learned that systemic change doesn't happen when one person challenges the system alone. It happens when an entire community decides the system needs to change." The presentation was received with a standing ovation. Afterwards, dozens of doctors approached to exchange experiences and ask for advice on how to replicate the American model in their countries. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the United Kingdom said, "Dr. Sarah, I want to implement something similar in the British public system. Can you help me adapt your model?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "But remember, the technical model is easy to copy. The difficult part is mobilizing the community to support change." Back in America, Sarah found a surprise waiting for her. The Department of Health had officially created the National Sarah Williams Pediatric Cardiac Assistance Program, which would be implemented in all states of the country. "Dr. Sarah," said the Secretary of Health during the launch ceremony, "your name is now permanently associated with America's public health policies. Future generations of doctors will study your case as an example of how one person can change an entire system." The national program provided for the creation of centers of excellence in pediatric cardiology in all major cities, with special protocols for emergency care of needy children. The initial budget was $100 million per year. "It's ironic," Sarah commented to Jennifer after the ceremony. 5 years ago, I was spending my own retirement money to operate on children clandestinely. Now the government is investing $100 million a year to officially do what I did in hiding." "It's not ironic," Jennifer corrected. "It's evolution. You planted the seed. Now you're seeing the tree grow." Michael, who had attended the entire ceremony, asked a question that surprised the adults. "Aunt Sarah, now that the government does what you did, don't you need to work anymore?" Sarah laughed at the innocence of the question. "Michael, the work changed, but it didn't end. Now, instead of operating on children in hiding, I teach other doctors to operate on children officially. It's different work, but equally important." Indeed, Sarah had become the main consultant for the national program. She traveled the country training medical teams, implementing protocols, ensuring that care maintained the same quality she offered in her clandestine clinic. During one of these trips to Atlanta, Georgia, Sarah met Dr. Francisco Santos, a young cardiologist who had been inspired by her story to specialize in pediatric cardiology. "Dr. Sarah," Francisco said, "I read about your case when I was deciding my medical specialization. Your story made me realize that medicine isn't just science, it's also social justice." "How so?" "I realized it's no use mastering the best surgical techniques if those techniques don't reach those who need them most. I chose pediatric cardiology because I want to ensure no child dies for lack of access to treatment." Sarah smiled. It was exactly the type of impact she hoped to cause in new generations of doctors. "Francisco, what's your biggest challenge here in Georgia?" "Distance. Many families live in rural areas, hundreds of miles from the hospital. Children arrive here in critical condition because the trip takes too long." Sarah thought for a moment. "How about we create mobile pediatric cardiology units, teams that travel to rural areas doing early diagnoses and emergency surgeries?" Francisco's eyes lit up. "That would be revolutionary. We could take treatment to the children instead of waiting for them to come to us." That's how the Heart Caravans project was born. Mobile units equipped with state-of-the-art technology that traveled through rural America, offering free pediatric cardiac care. The pilot project was launched 6 months later, with 2 mobile units covering rural Georgia and Alabama. The results were impressive. In 3 months, the caravans served more than 200 children, performed 50 surgeries, and saved at least 15 lives that would probably be lost due to distance from specialized centers. The Heart Caravans story caught international media attention. CNN did a special report on the project, calling it American Innovation in Public Health. The BBC produced a 30-minute documentary about Sarah and the impact of her work. "It's surreal," Sarah commented to Jennifer while watching the BBC documentary. "5 years ago, I was a fugitive sleeping on the street. Today, my story is being told on British television." "You deserved every recognition," Jennifer replied. "You never gave up doing what you thought was right." Michael, now 5 years old and increasingly interested in Sarah's work, made a perceptive observation. "Aunt Sarah, do you think if you had given up when you were arrested, would I be alive today?" The question caught Sarah by surprise. Michael was right. If she had accepted the conviction and not fled, she would never have met Jennifer, never operated on Michael, and he probably would have died waiting in the Medicaid line. "You're right, Michael. Sometimes not giving up on doing the right thing saves lives we don't even imagine we're going to save. That's why I'll never give up on anything important," Michael declared, with the determination of a 5-year-old child. 7 years after her escape from prison, Sarah was being considered for the Nobel Peace Prize. The nomination came from a group of international doctors who argued that her work had contributed significantly to reducing child mortality and promoting social justice in healthcare. "Dr. Sarah," said the Norwegian ambassador during a ceremony in Washington, D.C., "regardless of the final result, your Nobel nomination is already recognition that medicine and human rights are inseparable." Sarah was honored by the nomination, but her focus remained on daily work. That same month, she was supervising the program's implementation in Anchorage, Alaska, where distances and Arctic logistics created unique challenges. "Dr. Sarah," said Dr. Roberto Nakamura, the program coordinator in Alaska, "how do we adapt the Heart Caravans for a region where transportation is by helicopter and snowmobile?" "Simple," Sarah replied. "We create Arctic caravans, specialized vehicles that can navigate extreme conditions, bringing cardiological care to remote communities." The Arctic Caravans project became even more innovative than the terrestrial units. Specially adapted vehicles, equipped with surgical rooms and diagnostic equipment, traveled through Alaska's wilderness, offering care to populations who would never have access to cardiologists. The first Arctic caravan was launched 2 years later, in a ceremony attended by the President of the United States. "Dr. Sarah Williams represents the best of America," said the President during the ceremony. "A person who transformed her individual knowledge into collective benefit, who changed not just lives, but entire systems." That day, Sarah was accompanied by Jennifer, who had become National Coordinator of Social Assistance for the program, and Michael, now 7 years old and fascinated by the Arctic caravan operations. "Aunt Sarah," Michael asked while exploring the vehicle, "when I'm a doctor, will I also have a caravan?" "If you want, of course. But remember, the important thing isn't having a caravan, it's having a purpose." "What's my purpose?" Sarah knelt to be at the boy's height. "Your purpose, Michael, is to use your talents to help people who need it most. If it's through a caravan, great. If it's another way, also great. The important thing is never forgetting you had a second chance at life and can give second chances to others." Michael nodded seriously, as if he perfectly understood the responsibility Sarah was describing. 10 years after her escape from prison, Sarah was invited to give the graduation speech at Harvard Medical School. It was an honor rarely granted to professionals who weren't traditional academics. "Dear future doctors," Sarah began her speech before 200 graduates. You're receiving today a diploma that gives you the power to save lives, but I want to talk about the responsibility that comes with that power. She told her story from the beginning. The successful cardiologist, the clandestine clinic, the escape, life on the streets, meeting Jennifer and Michael, the public demonstration, changing the system. I learned that being a doctor isn't just mastering techniques. It's having courage to question systems that prevent those techniques from reaching those who need them. She paused and looked directly at the young doctors. Some of you will work in private hospitals, treating patients who can pay for the best treatments. There's nothing wrong with that, but I hope you never forget that on the other side of the city, there are children who equally need you, but can't pay. One of the graduates raised his hand. Dr. Sarah, how do we find balance between personal financial sustainability and social responsibility? Good question, Sarah replied. I'm not suggesting you give up your careers to work for free. I'm suggesting you find ways to include social responsibility in your careers. She explained how many doctors, inspired by her story, had created sustainable systems, dedicating 1 day per week to free care, creating foundations funded by their own private practices, developing technologies that make treatments cheaper. The important thing is never accepting that children die for lack of access. There's always a creative way to solve the problem. The speech was received enthusiastically by the graduates. Afterwards, several approached to exchange contacts and discuss ways to implement social responsibility in their future careers. A young doctor named Patricia said, Dr. Sarah, I want to work with pediatric cardiology in needy communities. Can you guide me? Of course, but first tell me why. Because I grew up in a poor family and know what it's like to desperately need medical treatment and not have access. I want to ensure other children don't go through what I went through. Sarah smiled. It was exactly the type of motivation that guaranteed the work would continue in the next generations. 15 years after her escape from prison, Sarah was being honored by the National Academy of Medicine with the title of Doctor of the Century for her contribution to the development of social pediatric cardiology in America. During the ceremony in New York City, hundreds of doctors who had been inspired by her story were present, dozens of former patients who are now healthy adults, and representatives of similar programs that had been created in other countries based on the American model. Sarah Williams isn't just an exceptional doctor, said the Academy president during the tribute. She's a revolutionary who proved that one person with clear purpose can change entire systems. Jennifer and Michael, now 12 years old, were in the front row. Michael had grown a lot, but maintained the same intellectual curiosity and determination to help others he had shown since childhood. Aunt Sarah, he had said the previous week, I've decided I want to study medicine to specialize in pediatric cardiology. Why, Michael? Because I want to continue your work. I want to ensure no child goes through what I went through, needing surgery and not being sure if they'll get it. Sarah was moved by the answer. The boy she had saved 15 years ago now wanted to dedicate his life to saving other children. Michael, if that's what you really want, I support you completely. But remember, medicine is a profession that demands a lot. Are you sure? I am. You taught me that when we have an important purpose, no sacrifice is too great. During her acceptance speech at the National Academy ceremony, Sarah reflected on her journey. When I started operating on needy children in my clandestine clinic, I thought I was just saving individual lives. I didn't imagine I was planting seeds for systemic change. She looked at the audience full of young doctors. Today, I see that each life saved multiplies infinitely. The children we operated on became adults who inspire others. The doctors who were touched by our story created new programs. The systems we changed became models for other countries. She made an emotional pause. I learned that no act of kindness is too small to make a difference, and that when we act with courage and purpose, the impact goes far beyond what we can imagine. The audience rose in an ovation that lasted more than 5 minutes. That same day, a new family arrived at the hospital with a cardiac child. Sarah smiled and went to receive them, knowing it would be another life saved by the system her courage had helped create. And so ends the story of Sarah Williams, the doctor who lost everything to save children, became a fugitive from justice, but never lost her humanity, who found a family when she least expected it and discovered that sometimes we need to challenge the system to change it. Sarah proved that no matter how impossible the situation seems, there's always hope for those who have courage to do the right thing, that one person with clear purpose can move mountains and change laws. And that true success isn't measured by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we achieve for others. More importantly, Sarah showed that when we do the right thing for the right reasons, the universe conspires to help us. The right people appear at the right time. Opportunities open up. Justice prevails. If this story touched your heart as it touched mine, leave your like and share in the comments which part moved you most. Would you do what Sarah did? Would you risk your career and freedom to save lives of unknown children? Subscribe to the channel for more stories that make us reflect on courage, sacrifice, and the power of one determined person to change the world. Hit the bell to not miss any inspiring story. Tell us, do you believe it's sometimes necessary to break unjust rules to do good? Have you ever had to choose between following the law and following your conscience? We want to hear your experience in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that we all have the power to make a difference, regardless of our situation. Sometimes, the greatest courage isn't in grand heroic gestures, but in small acts of kindness repeated day after day. Thank you for being here with us and for being part of this journey of stories that inspire and make us believe the world can be a better place when we choose to act with courage and compassion. Remember, you too can be the hero in someone's story. You too can be the person who appears at the right moment to change a life. You too can choose to make a difference. Until the next story, a heartfelt embrace.